I didn't go to the asylum to chase ghosts. I went because I owed someone an answer. 2 months earlier, my cousin Lena sent me a link to a local history forum with a grainy photo attached. The photo showed a crowd of people in front of a long brick building with boarded windows. You could tell it was late in the day from the shadows, the kind that pull long fingers across cracked pavement. In the center, a man stood by the front steps in a hospital coat that hung like a curtain around him. He stared at the photographer as if the photographer had slapped him. He looked young. He looked angry. Lena circled him in red and typed, "Doesn't this look like your dad? My father had left when I was 9. The last time I saw him, he was sitting on the hood of his car, writing numbers on a napkin, telling me how to reach him once he got settled. He never did. My mother remarried. The world went on. I learned to stop checking other men's faces at gas stations. I wrote back to Lena and told her she was seeing things. She sent a second message 10 minutes later. The forum says the building is Mercy Hill State Hospital. They called it an asylum back then. It's up near Ridgefield. If you want, I'll drive." We didn't go right away. There's a difference between thinking about a place and deciding to walk into it. I was working nights at an auto shop. The pay was decent if I stayed late. The manager kept adding cars to my list. My hands always smelled like old tires. I told myself there would be a better time to go. And then I found myself sitting in my kitchen after sunrise, scrolling through the forum with greasy fingerprints on my phone. A retired nurse had posted that she remembered Dr. Hale from Mercy Hill. She said he was strict with the patients, that he kept to himself, that he didn't like the press. Someone else posted an old intake ledger. I zoomed in. The black slashes of a fountain pen cut across patient names, dates, initials, a column labeled notes. The last pages were water-stained. One corner had a brown ring, like someone rested a mug on it. None of the names meant anything to me. I scrolled again. There was a thread about the flood. People said a pipe burst in winter, and the administration building took on water. They shut the place down for good after that. A contractor stiffed on the job posted grainy video of a pump chugging in a hallway while men in hard hats shouted over the noise. He panned the camera past a door with reinforced glass. Inside, cabinets, a scale, a toppled chair with a harness. I stopped and replayed that part. My dad worked maintenance. He could fix anything, as long as it was small enough to carry in a toolbox. When he taught me to use a wrench, he said, "If you're stuck, change your angle." He never told me what he did before he met my mother. Mostly, he didn't talk about himself at all. I zoomed in on the coat the man wore in the photograph. It was the style from old movies. Straight, white, nearly down to the ankles. The face was hard to read because the photo had lost detail where the light was bright. But the jawline, the way he set his mouth, the awkward tilt of his head. Yes, I could see why Lena had circled him. That night I said out loud in my apartment, "It's probably nothing." I heard how unconvincing that sounded. I texted Lena, "Let's go Saturday." She sent a heart and a skull. That was her sense of humor. Saturday morning, fog covered the highway like pulled cotton. The GPS took us past farm stands selling honey in old houses with metal stars hung above the doors. We crossed a narrow bridge with wood planks that clicked under the tires. The asylum sat back from the road behind a row of maples. The branches were bare. The leaves under them were flattened into a wet carpet. Lena turned off the engine and we listened to the ticking as the car cooled. "So," she said, "field trip. You brought a flashlight?" I asked. She held one up, then a second one. "Got backups. Batteries too. Also a sandwich for each of us, but they're sad." I laughed. It helped. From the road, the building looked like a school someone had erased halfway. Windows metal-plated or boarded over, paint flaking off the trim. The sign out front had the paint chipped enough that only the shadow of letters remained. You could look at the shape and guess what it used to say. We walked up the long front path between two patches of dead grass. The asphalt had a belly, like something underneath had settled. On the steps, someone had spray-painted a cartoon face with one eye bigger than the other. The door was chained, but the side entrance was open if you knew how to look. The Forum had said so, and the Forum was right. We went down 3 concrete steps into a loading bay and ducked through a cut chain-link fence. Somebody had bent a panel out and propped it with a broken broom handle. Inside, the smell changed. Outside, it was damp leaves and distant wood smoke. Inside, it smelled like wet paper, dust, and something like old soap. My breath clouded slightly. I pulled my jacket tighter. Lena clicked on a flashlight. The beam scraped a hallway full of paint curls and dark doorways. A sign on the wall said dietary, with an arrow. Another said records. "Where first?" she asked. "Records," I said, before I could talk myself out of it. The floor had soft spots. We stepped around them. If I looked too far ahead, the hall seemed to bend and tilt like the lens of a bad camera. We passed a door with a sheet of plexiglass. A storage room with shelves sagging under damp cardboard boxes. A stretcher with a torn mattress leaned against the wall like a drunk taking a break. At the end of the hall, the door to records was open. You could see the mark where the lock had been forced. We squeezed through. It was a square room with metal shelves on 3 sides. From the shape of the dust on the floor, a filing cabinet had once stood in the center and had been dragged away. Water stained the ceiling in a wide brown shape like a country on an old map. On the floor, folders had melted into layered pulp. I crouched and peeled one up with both hands. Paper came away from paper like skin from an onion. The top sheet said Ward C in faded purple ink. Lena swept her light across a row of books high on a shelf. "Ledger?" she asked. The books were swollen from damp. Their leather covers were cracked, and when I pulled one toward me, flakes stuck to my fingers. The binding sighed as it opened. Pages were stamped with dates and lines for names. The ink ran in some places where water had licked the edge. I ran my finger down a column until it came to a series of initials that matched a set I'd seen online. It didn't feel like proof. It felt like looking at a shadow and calling it a person. We flipped farther back. A page had a list of staff assignments: nurses, orderlies, maintenance, administration. The names meant nothing to me until they did. My mouth went dry. Lawrence A. Dane, Mate. I had only ever seen my father's name written on one document, his signature on the back of an old photograph my mother kept in a drawer for years and finally threw out during a move. That signature was loopy and unsure. This was printed, neat, done by someone else. But there it was. Lena leaned in with the light. "Well," she said, "there it is." I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. I traced the letters again, as if they might smear. "Keep looking," she said gently. "There might be more." There was. A few pages later, a staff roster from spring listed L. Dane with a shift next to the word boiler. After that, his name showed up every few weeks. The last entry we could find had a note added, "Transferred, Bleach D." "Where's Building D?" I asked. Lena clicked her tongue. "They used letters for different wings. Sometimes they tore a wing down. Sometimes they drew a new letter. The map I saw wasn't complete." She paused. "But if they moved him, that means he didn't leave when the flood happened." I swallowed. The thought of him walking these halls with a toolbox under his arm landed on me with real weight. He would have known which doors stuck in summer and which ones swelled shut in winter. He would have known what sound the elevator made when it needed grease. I pictured him humming under his breath in the way I remembered from when he fixed the loose knob on our back door. He hummed the same 3 notes over and over. Not a song. More like testing a sound to see if it was the same each time. We took turns taking pictures on our phones even though the light was bad. Then the beam of Lena's flashlight found a corkboard half undone on the far wall. Thumbtacks still bit into it. A corner of paper hung curled. I smoothed it with my palm. A notice to staff about an upcoming inspection. Staff were told to check that doors closed and locked as designed. Lower right, tiny type. Any defects should be reported to Mr. L. Dane, maintenance, via the standard form. I stared at that line until it blurred. "You okay?" Lena asked. "Yeah," I said. I wasn't. But that's what people say. We left the records room and walked back into the main hall. The building felt larger than it looked from outside because of the way the corridors folded into one another. We found a nurse's station with a U-shaped counter. Behind it, a small room with a window for passing forms. The glass was clouded by grime. On a shelf inside, someone had left a pair of reading glasses with one arm broken. The lenses were gray with dust. At some point, we stopped talking. It wasn't a decision. There was just not much to say. Every sound we made bounced back at us, a little duller. In the administration wing, we found a room where the ceiling had dropped onto the floor in bright squares of soggy fiberboard. The pattern on the carpet looked like a tennis net. I kicked a tile aside, and a dark stain spread, and then shrank as water found a new place to go. Lena pointed at a sign on a door. Exam 3. Her mouth slanted in that way she had when she was trying not to smile at something inappropriate. "Do not," she said, "make me go into any room with an exam number." "We don't need to," I said. "I'm interested in the basement." She squinted at me. "Of course you are." The stairwell to the basement smelled colder, like clay. The metal railing had missing brackets, and the spots where the screws had been pulled out were ringed by rust. I ran my thumb along the banister and came away with red dust. On the second landing, a window had been painted shut, and the paint had cracked into a spider web through which we could see dirt at ground level and some dead vines pressed flat. At the bottom, the light thinned. The air felt stuck. You know how some rooms feel like they have a draft even when all the windows are closed, and some rooms feel like they're holding their breath? The basement felt like the second kind. We walked past a door labeled laundry, past a room with a line of sinks and a wall of mirrors, a return duct blowing nothing. The shadows there were thick because anything reflective multiplies whatever's not there into a crowd. I stopped outside a room labeled H therapy. The letters were peeled, but you could make out the missing ones by the clean outline under the dirt. Hydrotherapy. I don't like it, Lena said quietly. I really don't. You can wait upstairs, I said. I won't be long. She shook her head. No, I want to see what you see. The door opened inward with a sigh. Inside, the floor sloped toward a drain covered by a grid of metal bars. On the left, a row of tall tubs like you still see in old photos of people bathing. On the right, concrete tables with rubber straps hanging off the sides like dead snakes. I had to tell myself that they were straps, just buckles and rubber, because my brain wanted to make more out of them. In the corner, a cart held glass thermometers in a stand, their tips broken, their silver threads dull. Along one wall, someone had painted a mural of a landscape in calm colors. A lake, low hills, a clump of trees. It looked like the kind of painting that tries not to be anything special on purpose. In the half-light, the shapes had melted together, so the trees looked like the backs of people standing shoulder to shoulder. You could tell somebody put care into it, and then somebody else let it be ruined. Tell me if you hear anything, I said. You think we're not going to hear anything, Lena murmured. The building's old. Buildings talk. I walked along the tubs and looked at the fixtures. The knobs were heavy, the kind you have to grab with your whole hand. On one, a tag hung from string, wrinkled and stained. I leaned close and made out my father's handwriting. I knew it because we had almost the same way of making a capital L, placing the tip of the pen, drawing the long horizontal line, and then the short downward hook. The tag said leak, valve, noted, February 9th, initialed LD. For a second the room pulled closer, like when you stand too fast. I put my hand against the cool, chipped porcelain and looked at the tag again to make sure I hadn't made it up. I hadn't. Lena stood next to me with her light trained on it, and her voice was soft when she said, There you go. I don't know what this tells me, I said. Only that he was here. It tells you that he wrote this, she said. That he touched this place. That's not nothing. I folded the tag's edge up with my fingernail and let it drop. I stared past the tubs to a door half hidden by the mural. It was almost a service door, painted over to match the wall. It had dried drips along one side where someone slopped paint and didn't wipe it up. The handle was a plain metal lever, steady even with the rot around it. It looked like it led somewhere the public wasn't meant to go. I knew that feeling. When you work in maintenance, doors like that are where the work lives. I tried the handle, and to my surprise, it pushed open. Behind it, a narrow corridor went few paces to another door. The air smelled like old wood, not the same damp as the main hall. This felt more dry, like it had been sealed for a while. The second door had a simple hasp, and the padlock had been cut a long time ago, because the metal around it had darkened where rain or condensation had crept under the latch. I eased it open. We found a storage room the size of a small garage. One wall had shelves with boxes labeled with black marker, gowns, hoses, fasteners, forms. Some newer handwriting had crossed out the original words and replaced them. Gone, gone, gone. Stuff. A workbench ran along the back under a narrow window well. On the bench lay a stack of forms bound with twine, a three-legged stool, a metal lunch pail with a dent like a thumbprint. I knew the pail at once. He'd had one when I was little, and used to set it on the porch with a clank. I picked it up and the lid squeaked. Inside were 2 folded napkins, a small salt shaker, and a screwdriver with a broken handle. "Okay," Lena said. "This is officially too much." I smiled despite the tightness in my chest. "He always carried a screwdriver with a broken handle," I said. "He said it could get into places a regular one couldn't." Lena stood by the bench and picked up one of the forms, the paper held together. "Work orders," she said, flipping. "Door squeals, radiator leaks, light flickers. One says, noise from pipes at night, staff uneasy. No fix listed." I held out my hand. She passed the forms to me. The writing on that one was tidy, with a slippery pen that left dark trails. The note said, "Pipes in Ward C appear to conduct voices. Please investigate." Underneath, someone had written in smaller letters, "Voices do not resemble staff." The first person had circled that and drawn a question mark. I let out a breath. Somebody had a sense of humor. Lena shrugged. Or somebody worked too many nights. The room had a door on the far wall. A sign next to it said boiler in white letters on red. My father's name had been next to boiler on the roster. I swallowed. I put the lunch pail down with care and walked to the door. The handle moved under my hand but stuck at the last centimeter, like a tongue pulled between teeth. I leaned my shoulder into it, and the seal broke. The old air rustled my hair as if it had been waiting for me. The boiler room was longer than I expected, the ceiling low, pipes running like ribs along both sides. The floor was concrete with a rectangle of oil stains around where something heavy had stood, but was now gone. In the middle, on an island of clean floor, someone had made a desk out of 2 milk crates and a door set flat across them. On it sat a lamp without a bulb, a stack of coffee-stained sticky notes, and a small radio. The kind with a single big dial and a handle. Lena ran her light across the pipes. The paint on them had bubbled in places from heat. Somebody had written numbers in grease pencil next to joints. Another hand had added notes in ballpoint. Clanks when hot. Bleeds air here. Don't touch this one. Each with an arrow. At the far end, the pipes disappeared into a wall and came out again where the bricks had been punched through and patched badly. The break edges looked like bitten bread. The patch was lopsided and crooked and held with mortar that had smears and fingerprints in it. I put my palm to it and felt nothing, just the cool of brick. "What are you looking for?" Lena asked softly. "I don't know," I said. "Something to tell me why he didn't say any of this." "Maybe he thought he'd come back to it," she said. "People always think there's more time." We stood there and listened. I don't know how long. The basement had that way of turning time into more floor. When your feet hurt and you can't explain why, that's when you know you've been standing still too long. I heard the building shift as the temperature changed. Somewhere far above, a piece of metal tinked as it cooled. Water moved in a pipe not here but somewhere else. It's easy to make sense out of sounds if you want to. I turned the small radio knob. It didn't do anything, of course. No power. But the knob moved with that nice resistance old knobs have. I imagined my father doing the same, not even to listen to anything, just the motion of it in his hand, a habit to mark time while he thought. The radio had a price sticker on the bottom, $4.99 from a thrift store. It had been here long enough to collect a soft coat of dust, the kind that disappears if you breathe on it. On the wall above the door, someone had written with a permanent marker, "If noises, close for 5. The letters were big and cramped, as if the person had wanted to write it quickly and leave. I tried to picture my father writing that. I couldn't. We left the boiler room and locked the door behind us out of habit, even though the lock didn't catch. In the storage room, I took one of the work orders, the one with the note about voices, and folded it into my jacket pocket. I told myself I'd bring it back. I didn't really believe that. I wanted to hold something that had lived here. Back in hydrotherapy, we stood in the doorway as if we were waiting for permission to leave. It's hard to explain that feeling. You know when you visit someone you don't know well, and you can't tell if the conversation is done? So you hover by the door, half-turned, hand near the knob. That's how it was, except there was no one to say goodbye to. We left anyway. On the way up the stairs, Lena said, "We can go now." We did what we came to do. "I want to see D-Wing," I said. There was a transfer. "I want to see where that is." She rubbed her forehead. "It might not exist anymore." "I know," I said. "But if it does, we should at least check." We went back to the main floor and found a mounted map near an elevator that had paper jammed into the doors so they wouldn't swing. The map had a plastic cover that was cracked in an X, as if someone had punched it and missed the center. I wiped the fog of dust with my sleeve. You could see the outline of the campus. A central building, 2 wings, a courtyard, an annex to the west labeled D. The annex connected by a covered walkway. "Of course it's outside," Lena said. "We'll have to cross the courtyard." We did. The courtyard had cracked concrete and the remains of a fountain that had once been shaped like a shell. Someone had dumped a broken office chair there. The sky was flat white and bright without warmth. It made everything look like a photograph printed on cheap paper. I looked at the windows for movement and saw nothing but dull glass and my own dark shape moving across it. The door to the covered walkway opened with a slow scrape, like pushing a dresser across a rug. The corridor inside smelled like a swimming pool without the water, the ghost of chlorine lingering. The windows on both sides were the kind with wire mesh embedded. Most weren't broken. Where the wire showed through, it had rusted into a brown lace. We walked past a row of hooks where coats might have hung. Above them, a faded banner that read, "Community Day." In letters someone had tried to make cheerful with bright paint. The paint had flattened and picked up the color of the dust. D-Wing had a different feel, as if it had been built at another time by another company with a different budget. The doors were heavier. The floors didn't sag in the same way. The signs were embossed plastic instead of painted metal. I tried the nearest door. It was stuck. The next one opened to a waiting room with chairs lined up and a low table with a scattered fan of patient pamphlets, most of which had turned into wavy cardboard from damp. "What did they do here?" Lena asked. I picked up a pamphlet, peeled 2 pages apart, and read a heading. Orientation for temporary holds. The words had the tone of someone talking to a crowd and hoping everyone was listening but knowing they weren't. The lower half of the sheet had a floor plan with arrows and repeated phrases like, "Stay with your group," and "Staff will direct you." We moved into the hall and past exam rooms, an office where a computer tower sat gutted like a rib cage, cables pulled out and looped around a chair leg, and a room with a 2-way mirror that had a crack like a vein running through it. On a bulletin board, someone had left a printed email thread about a budget request for door replacements. "This is not a priority at this time," it said, Please revisit next fiscal year. At the end of the hall, a set of double doors had a sign, Observation. The handle had a push bar with a faded sticker that once said, Alarm will sound. The alarm did not sound. Inside, the light from the high windows sharpened everything. The white paint on the lower half of the walls had yellowed. The upper half was a green that belonged in a school cafeteria. Along one side, rooms with small windows and metal doors opened onto the hall. Each door had a slot that could be slid open from the outside. I didn't look through the slots. I didn't want to look and find only my own eyes staring back. Lena touched my arm. Her fingers were cold. "We've done enough," she said. "I know you want to follow every line, but you got what you came for." I nodded. My chest hurt with the kind of tired that comes after a long day of thinking. "Okay," I said. "One more thing. Then we go." "What's the thing?" "The roof," I said. He used to take me up to the roof of our building when I was little to point out weather. He'd say, "See that line? That's where the cold meets the warm. That's where rain happens." He liked being on top of things. If he worked here, he would have found a way up. Lena rolled her eyes like she was too tired to argue. "Fine. Roof. Then we leave." We found a maintenance stair near the end of D wing behind a door propped open with a phone book swollen to twice its size. The stairs were narrow and steep and had a window at each landing. Through the glass, you could see the courtyard, and beyond it, the road like a ribbon. At the last landing, the door to the roof was locked, but the lock had been drilled out in the past, and someone had plugged it with a wooden dowel. I pried it out with the broken-handled screwdriver from the lunch pail I had taken without thinking I had taken it. I had slipped it into my jacket like it belonged there. The rooftop was flat tar and gravel with a low wall around it. The view was of trees and the backs of small houses, and a water tower with the town's name painted in blue letters, flaked to gray here and there. The wind pushed my hair across my eyes. It smelled cleaner up there, the way air does when it has room to move. There were footprints in the gravel, old ones, hardened by rain and sun, the edges crumbled. They led from the door to the edge and back, and then to a spot near a utility box. There, a milk crate had been turned upside down to make a seat. A little pile of cigarette butts lay next to it, brown like chewed ends of pencils. I stood by the crate and looked down at the courtyard, then up at the clouds. I tried to picture my father sitting here, taking an extra 5 minutes before going back to fix what needed fixing. I tried to remember the sound of his laugh. It didn't come to me. Lena put her arm around my shoulders and squeezed. We stood there a while. The town made small sounds. A dog barking, a truck downshifting on the road, wind in the water tower's ladder. After a while, those sounds fell away, and I became aware of something else I hadn't put a name to yet. It was like standing in a house and knowing someone else is there, not because you hear them, but because the air feels organized around a second person's heat. The feeling slid across my skin and settled at the base of my neck. "We should go," Lena said, almost in a whisper, and I realized she felt it too. "Okay," I said, and we did. We made our way back through the stairwell, the hall, the walkway, and the main building, toward the loading bay where we had come in. The light outside had shifted a little, the clouds moving. In the big front room, I turned once toward the nurse's station again. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd left something there. That was when I saw the soft imprint on the counter, in the dust. It was the shape of a hand, not a full palm, a partial. The side of a hand set down and slid, leaving a streak and an angle of 4 pads that could have been fingertips. It pointed toward the record's door. It could have been old. It probably was. But I hadn't seen it on the way in. Maybe I'd missed it. It bothered me that it bothered me. In the hallway outside the loading bay, Lena stopped. "Do you hear that?" she asked. At first I said no because I didn't. Then I did. It was a sound like a small motor far away. It rose and fell, steady. It was not a car engine. It was more like a fan belt slipping. I knew that sound like I knew the smell of oil. "The elevator?" I said. "But there's no power." Lena swallowed. "Maybe there's a generator on a timer." The forum said people tried to wire things for work. Scavengers, contractors. Somebody could have left something. Her statement was reasonable. It also didn't feel true. The sound did not come from the elevator shaft. It came from farther in, from deeper down. I looked at her, and she looked at me, and that shared look was enough to tell me that if I said we should leave, she would agree without argument. The door was right there. The sky was right there. I turned toward the hall. "Are you serious?" she said. "I have to know what it is," I said, and I hated how familiar that sentence sounded in my own mouth, because my father had said things like that when he disappeared into the shed for an hour to fix a radio or a lamp he found at a yard sale, coming out with dust in his hair and a pleased smile, saying, "It was just a stuck bearing. You change the angle and it gives." Lena closed her eyes and opened them again. "5 minutes," she said. "If I say we go, we go." 5 minutes, I said. I checked my phone. No signal. Of course not. I slid it back into my pocket and we walked, not running, because running makes the wrong kind of noise. We passed records. We passed the stairs to the basement. The sound was stronger there, so we took the stairs. At the bottom, the smell had changed slightly. Something like hot dust when a radiator kicks on for the first time in the season. We moved along the hall, past laundry, past the mirrors, past hydrotherapy. The sound grew steady, like breath run through a machine. When we reached the storage room door behind the mural, I knew the sound came from the boiler room. Not exactly the boiler room, because the main boiler had been removed, but from somewhere attached to it. The door that had stuck before opened easily this time. That small fact turned the world by a degree. Inside the boiler room, the sound was the loudest. It came from beyond the patched wall. Through the brick breakthrough where the mortar had fingerprints, I felt a whispering draft. Not cool and not warm. It didn't feel like air from outside. It felt like air moving because something somewhere was turning. "What is that?" Lena said, barely voicing it. I didn't answer. I went to the patch and examined the edges. 2 bricks near the bottom were loose. They already had scratches on them, as if someone had pulled at them and put them back. The mortar there was newer than the rest, pale and sandy. I dug at it with the broken-handled screwdriver, and a chunk fell away with a dry crumble. I pried the first brick and set it down softly. The second came easier. Behind them, a dark square. "You don't know what's on the other side," Lena said. "No," I said. "That's true." I widened the hole. The edges rasped my knuckles. Dust stuck to the sweat on my skin. The sound breathed into my face like air from a vent. When the hole was big enough to get my arm through, I paused. "Maybe I should call out," I said. "And say what?" Lena asked. Her voice was flat. "Hello? It's your son? That's not how any of this works." She wasn't wrong. I sat back on my heels and looked at the edges of my shoes. The dust on them made them look older. I thought of the footprints on the roof, hardened by weather into shallow fossils. I looked into the hole and saw nothing but dark. "Hold the light steady," I said. "I am," she said. "I have been. I wish I weren't." I slid my arm through and felt empty space that turned into something. Wood, the edge of a frame, a narrow corridor beyond, maybe. The air had that lined-up feeling of a long space that runs under things. The sound was right there, louder, and it shivered through my bones. It reminded me of our old refrigerator at night when the house was quiet, and you woke up because you heard it hum, and for a second thought the noise came from inside your chest. I pulled my arm back and looked at the hole again. "I can fit," I said. Lena said my name the way you say a name when you're trying to keep someone from stepping off a curb into traffic. "You're not going in there." "I could just look," I said. "It's right there." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "You said 5 minutes." She held up her phone with the flashlight glow on her skin. "It's been 4. "1 more minute," I said. "Just to see." She glared. Then she sighed, which meant she knew she wouldn't stop me and had decided not to waste breath trying. "If you get stuck," she said, "I'm not strong enough to pull you by the legs." "I won't get stuck," I said, and the moment the words left, I felt how much they sounded like something people say right before they get stuck. I put both shoulders to the hole, slid one arm through, then the other, turned my head sideways, and eased in. The bricks snagged my jacket and made a ripping sound. I kept going. The floor on the other side was lower by a foot. I fell that foot, landed on my hands, and my palms slapped dust. I lay there a second and then rolled to my side so Lena could see my face in the halo of her light. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It's a service tunnel, like a crawl space, but taller." I stood up in a crouch. The ceiling was maybe 5 feet high. Pipes ran above, and the tunnel ran straight, then dog-legged out of sight. The sound came from around that bend. Lena's light made the dust look like snow. "If I can't see you in 10 seconds, she said, "I'm coming to get you by the ankle like a cartoon villain." I smiled, which felt wrong and right at once. "I'll be quick." I turned and moved forward in a crouch, one hand to the wall to keep from wobbling. The ground was gritty under my soles. On the wall, someone had scratched letters with a nail. O-U-T arrow. The arrow pointed toward the way I was going. The tunnel bent, then another bend, then a short flight of 2 steps down where the floor lowered again. The sound filled the space. It wasn't mechanical the way I thought. It was water, moving fast through a pipe, steady and strong, somewhere under the floor or behind the wall. The pipe vibrated through the structure. That was why it felt like a motor. The tunnel ended at a hatch made of wood, like a trapdoor. It had a simple ring handle rusted to a brown eye. The wood wasn't rotten. It had been kept dry by the way the tunnel channeled water away. I put my fingers under the ring and lifted. It resisted. Then it moved with a slow, sticky pull. I opened it enough to make a gap and looked through. The room beneath was small and square. The ceiling was low. A single light bulb screwed into a porcelain fixture in the center. It wasn't on, but light came in through a high window well just under the ceiling. Thin light, enough to show shapes. In the corner sat a metal chair, like the ones in the observation rooms. Against the far wall stood a tall cabinet with glass doors, empty. On the near wall, a sink with a curved neck. Under the light fixture, a line of dark on the floor. It looked like a crack. I took a breath and lifted the hatch farther until it balanced against a pipe. I looked back toward the hole where Lena waited. I could see only the glow of her flashlight spilling soft into the dust. The tunnel carried sound in a strange way. When I said her name, it sounded like someone else saying it from behind me. I shook that thought away. "I'm going down," I said. "Do you have to?" Her voice traveled poorly through the turn. It sounded tired. "Yes," I said, because the room looked like a place where someone had spent time alone. And if my father had worked here, he would have known all the tucked-away rooms where time could slip by without anyone noticing. I lowered myself through the hatch. My foot found something that took my weight, then another. The floor was solid. The air was warmer than the tunnel and smelled like bleach, faint but present. I stood up and let my eyes adjust. The line in the center of the room wasn't a crack. It was a mark. A scuff, long and straight, like something heavy on wheels had been rolled across the floor many times along the same path. I listened. The water sound was louder, but I could tell it came from behind the wall with the sink. There must have been a chase where pipes ran up. The room had no other doors, only the hatch and the small window with a spiderweb inside. On the sink's porcelain lip, someone had scratched initials with something sharp. LD. The letters were small and deep. They had taken time. I touched them with my fingertip and felt how the edges had been smoothed by fingers over the years. The act of touching something someone else has touched many times does a trick in your head. It pulls the two of you closer, even if the years between are long. "Find anything?" Lena called. "Maybe," I said. My voice bounced in the small space, soft and then softer. "I think he came here. Maybe he sat in this chair when he needed quiet." I felt around the chair's seat with my palm. Dust, a screw, the thin edge of paper. I pinched it and pulled. A photograph came up from where it had been pressed between the seat and the metal frame. It was small, the kind you could take in a photo booth, square with a white border. The picture showed a patch of sky and the top of a head. The framing was off. The person had tried to include his face and failed, catching only the line of hair and a corner of one eye. The hair was dark. The eye was not smiling. I slipped the photo into my jacket pocket next to the work order. My hand shook. I hated that it shook. I stood still until the shaking stopped. The hatch clunked a little as the pipe settled where it rested. I flinched. The sound was nothing. It felt like something. "I'm coming back," I said. "Good," Lena called, "because I don't like being near this hole without you." I put my hands on the hatch edge and, as I did, I noticed a row of numbers written in pencil on the wood, where only someone standing on the floor would see them. 17, 23, 19. 9, 4. The graphite was faint. The numbers had been written hard enough to dent the wood. They meant nothing to me, but they had meant something to whoever wrote them. I pressed my thumb against the 23. It smudged a little. I pulled myself up into the tunnel and lowered the hatch behind me until it almost closed, leaving it a crack open to feel the air move. I retraced my steps through the bends, the 2 steps, the long, low space. The sound of water settled back into the walls. The light from Lena's flashlight grew brighter as I came close. I popped out of the hole and leaned against the boiler room wall. Lena grabbed my elbow and pulled me away from the bricks. "Your face," she said. "What about it?" I asked. "It looks like you remembered something you forgot," she said. "I found a room," I said. "Not big, clean, cleaner than the rest. Some kind of utility space. There were initials on the sink. His. Probably his." She nodded, and her eyes shone with that mix of relief and worry that shows up when a story starts to look like it might be real. "Then you found what you needed?" "I don't know," I said, because the feeling inside me wasn't neat. It was tangled and dirty, and didn't match the story I'd told myself about what I'd feel if I found proof. I wasn't sure what came next. I wasn't sure there was a next beyond leaving. The building answered for me. The low sound of water through the wall hiccuped. It stopped. The quiet that followed wasn't silent. It had a weight to it. The way a room feels when the refrigerator kicks off and you realize only then that it had been humming for hours. In the quiet, the other noises in the building sharpened. The click of settling metal, a soft trickle somewhere far, a drip finding new rhythm, and then something else that I didn't want to recognize but did. A small, deliberate sound like something light sliding across paper. It came from the storage room side, from the workbench. I stepped toward the door and Lena caught my sleeve. "Don't," she said. "Let's just go. We can leave it." "I know," I said. "But if someone's here?" "If someone's here," she said, "we don't want to meet them." We stood for a second, our bodies at wrong angles to each other, like one of us would have to pull the other to move. Then a shadow moved across the narrow strip of light under the storage room door. We both saw it. We both went still in that trained way your body does when it doesn't want to be counted as moving. The shadow wasn't shaped like anything. It was just a thinning and then a thickening of the light, a stain passing over a smaller stain. Lena whispered, "Okay." Her voice was steady. "We're leaving now." I nodded and felt my own head bob. I took a step back and my heel knocked something that clinked. The radio on the milk crate desk. I hadn't realized I'd set it down there when I came in. The noise it made was so gentle that I felt stupid for reacting, but I reacted anyway. So did whoever, or whatever, was moving on the other side of the door. The shadow thickened and stopped. "Go," Lena said. I moved past her into the hall. We didn't run. We didn't not run. Our steps were shallow and fast. We passed hydrotherapy. We passed the mirrors where our faces looked stretched and thin. The stairwell to the main floor appeared like a square of lighter gray ahead. We climbed. At the landing, I cast one look back down into the basement without meaning to. It was a bad choice in a horror movie. This wasn't a movie. It was just a person in a building looking to see if the hall was empty. It was. The hall was empty. Upstairs, the air felt slightly warmer. The smell was the same. The light was a little flatter than before. Small changes, but enough that my brain pinned them and said, "It's later now." At the loading bay, the cut fence and the broom handle were where we had left them. We ducked through and stepped into the damp air that smelled like leaves again. The road was still there. The car was still there. When we got in, the seats were cold against our backs. Lena started the engine and didn't turn on the radio. She didn't have to say why. We drove over the narrow bridge. The water ran under it slower than I remembered from the morning. Or maybe I was watching it closer. The houses with metal stars on them watched us drive past. We didn't speak until the asylum was out of sight behind the trees. Then Lena said, "Tell me what you took." I had the work order in my pocket, the photo, the broken-handled screwdriver I had slipped into my jacket and forgotten I had until it was too late to forget again. "Only papers," I said. Things he might have touched. The screwdriver was in his lunch pail. "That's not nothing," she said. "You'll show me later. After food. I need food." I nodded. The steering wheel creaked under her hands. We turned onto the main road where the lanes widened. The sky had made up its mind to stay gray. The day felt used up. Half an hour later, after we'd put distance between ourselves and Mercy Hill, I reached into my pocket at a stoplight to feel the photo again. The corner had curled. I slid it out. The person in the booth had done a bad job with the angle, but it was enough to see the hairline and the corner of the eye. Enough to make me sure. It wasn't proof anyone would accept in a courtroom, but I didn't need a courtroom. I flipped the photo over. On the back, in pencil, someone had written numbers. 17, 23, 19, 9, 4. The same sequence as on the hatch. The graph of graphite looked the same too. The same pressure and the same way the numbers favored the right side of the line. "What's that?" Lena asked, glancing. "Numbers," I said. "They're written on the back of the photo. And on the hatch." "What do they mean?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said, and the fact that I said yet told me we weren't done. We ate at a diner with orange booths and a waitress who called us honey with a tired smile. The food warmed me but didn't settle. I excused myself to the restroom and stood at the sink longer than necessary with water running over my hands, because the ordinary noise of it made my head quiet for a moment. When I looked up into the mirror, there was only me. I was grateful for that. Back at the table, I spread the work order and the photo between us like cards. The numbers stared up, patient, as if they could wait me out. Lena tapped them with a fingernail. "Letters?" she said. "A is 1, B is 2, that kind of thing." I scribbled on a napkin. 17 is Q, 23 is W, 19 is S, 9 is I, 4 is D. QWSID, I said. "That's nonsense." "Maybe it's not that simple," she said. "Maybe it's a page and line, or a map grid, or he wrote it because he didn't trust his head." I folded the napkin and slid it into my pocket with the rest. "He used to make lists," I said. "Groceries, jobs for the weekend, things to buy for some project. He liked the feeling of crossing things off. Maybe he wrote numbers instead of words, because it felt safer." Lena chewed and looked at me over the edge of her glass. "Or because numbers don't betray you the way words do." We didn't talk about the shadow. We didn't talk about the handprint or the sound. We could have. Instead, we talked about the logistics of getting back next week when I had 2 days off in a row. About bringing masks for dust. About the safest way to pull bricks without making a noise that would coordinate every mouse and raccoon in the county. Ordinary talk made the edges of the day less sharp. When we paid and walked to the car, the streetlights had come on. The town looked like every small town at the edge of a map looks when it's getting ready to sleep. A man smoked in a doorway and looked at the sky like the sky owed him something. A kid in a hoodie pushed a bike with a rusted chain. A woman with a casserole dish walked fast. At my apartment, Lena made me promise to text when I woke up later that night, because she knew I would sleep in the afternoon. She drove off with a toot of the horn that tried to sound brave. I climbed the stairs and unlocked my door and stepped into the quiet. The quiet felt different from the building's quiet. It felt normal. My couch had the shape of my body worn into it. My sink had a spot where the enamel was chipped the size of a pea. The sheets on my bed had to be washed. Ordinary. Good. I put the work order and the photo on my kitchen table. The screwdriver I set beside them. I made coffee because the habit was stronger than the tired. While it dripped, I went to the closet and pulled down an old shoebox with the handful of things I still had that were connected to my father. A fishing license from a state we only lived in for 1 year. A pocket knife with a nicked blade. A Polaroid of him and me on a Ferris wheel where our faces are turned away and you can only tell who we are by the way we stand. I put the new things next to the old. The screwdriver looked right. The photo looked too clean beside the Polaroid's foggy colors, but it would age. Everything does. When I sat with the coffee, the numbers came back into my head. 17, 23, 19, 9, 4. I wrote them again on a piece of paper and stared until they blurred and reformed. I thought of the sink with the initials. I thought of the hatch and the ring handle. I thought of the milk crate on the roof and the footprints. I thought of the shadow that thickened and stopped. I slept badly. In the deep part of sleep, I dreamed I was in a hall with green paint and white above, and I could see the place where someone had painted over a word on the wall, and I knew the word under the paint was my name. When I woke, it was dark in the room, and for a second I didn't know where I was, because the sound of water moving through the pipes in my building echoed in my chest the way the asylums did. Then the refrigerator clicked on, and my own room returned, and I fell back onto the pillow like someone who has stumbled into a chair. The next morning I called in sick to the shop. I didn't do that often. The manager made a noise like he was chewing a tack. I told him I'd make it up. He said not to make a habit of it. I hung up and stared at the numbers again. I tried them as dates. I tried them as directions. I tried to picture my father's hand writing them. Slow, fast, angry, calm. I couldn't guess. I picked up the screwdriver and turned it over. The handle had the smooth wear of a tool used every day for years. Someone had wrapped the shaft near the handle with friction tape that had dried and cracked. The metal tip was magnetized in that weak way that comes from being rubbed against a magnet in a lazy circle while you talk to someone and watch their mouth move. It drew the corner of the paper toward it like a dog pulling on a leash. I drove to Lena's apartment with the items in a brown paper bag like takeout. She made eggs and handed me a plate and didn't ask me how I slept. Her eyes were sharp. She pointed at the bag. "Let me see," she said. I spread the work order, the photo, the screwdriver on her table. She touched each in turn. "The photo," she said. "You sure that's him?" "Yes," I said, not because I was 100%, but because I needed to be more than 50, and saying yes gave me 60, which felt like something to stand on. She nodded. "Then the numbers mean something he wanted you to find," she said. "Or something he wanted someone to find. Maybe not you. Maybe just someone who understood the building." "What if they're coordinates?" I asked. "For a map inside the asylum?" "Or for something else?" I said. "A key. A padlock. A code to a supply closet. The way the work order lists a room by ward, then by number." Lena went to her bookshelf and pulled down a stack of spiral notebooks she kept for budgeting and lists. She flipped to a blank page and wrote the sequence at the top. Then she wrote numbers 1 through 26 down the side and letters next to them the way kids learn decoding and puzzles. We tried ciphers for an hour. Nothing came out that made sense. We tried reversing the order, subtracting from 26, splitting into pairs. We got nonsense more than once, but sometimes not total nonsense. Words like SID and WIN and RID, which could be fragments of a lot of things and nothing at all. When she got up to pour more coffee, I stood at her window and looked down at the street, where a man in a white van parallel parked in 5 moves. On the radio, someone read the weather, and the numbers there made sense to my body. High in the 50s. Chance of rain after noon. I thought of the water in the pipes again, and the way it had stopped. And I realized I'd been listening for it the whole time we were in the boiler room. The way a person listens for the voice of someone they live with in a crowd. "We have to go back," I said, when Lena handed me the mug. She didn't argue. That saved time. "We'll start in D-Wing," I said. "And then the hatch. And then the room. And then we'll follow the tunnel the other way, if it goes the other way. And if it doesn't," she said, "we don't make one." "We won't," I said. "We take masks," she said, "and a better flashlight, and gloves. And we don't stay if we see anyone," I said. "We leave if we see anyone," she said, "and we don't talk to them." We agreed like people planning a simple job. It felt dumb to say the rules out loud. It also felt like building a small fence and hoping it was taller than whatever we were fencing against. On the way back to Mercy Hill, the clouds were lower, and now and then the wipers smeared drizzle off the glass. The maples by the road had lost more leaves. The narrow bridge didn't complain as much under the tires, damp wood changing pitch. We parked in the same spot and cut the engine. The asylum looked the same, and not the same. The way places do on a second visit when your eyes already have a file folder started and they're filling it. We took the same path, bent the same panel of fence, slipped past the same broom handle. The smell greeted us like the breath of an old dog. We moved faster because we knew the way. That felt like a mistake even as it saved time. At the records room I paused and looked in again, not because I thought new documents would have appeared, but because I wanted to see the empty in the same light from the day before. It was the same. The melted paper on the floor was a little more melted where our footprints had shifted it. That was all. In hydrotherapy, the mural was still the same murky map of people who weren't trees. The straps still hung heavy, and I didn't look at them. I am not superstitious, but I think you can be polite to a place, and it will be polite back. and that was my way. We went to the storage room, the workbench, the lunch pail. The work orders were as we left them, minus the one I took. At the boiler room, I stopped at the patch in the wall. The bricks I had pulled were where I had set them, edged in dust. The hole was the size of my shoulders now. I told myself it looked like any hole, not like an invitation, not like a mouth. Lena adjusted her mask and said, "Let me go first this time." "No," I said, sharper than I meant to. "I know the turns." She pulled her mask back down so I could see her mouth twist. "That's not how fairness works." "You watch my feet," I said. "If they stop moving, you pull." She shook her head. "I already told you I can't pull you." "Then you promise to leave if I don't come back." "I won't do that either," she said. "You know me." We looked at each other, and the tiny argument was a way to hold off the moment where the hole became a door. Then we let it go. I went in first, turned my face to spare my cheek from the rough brick, breathed shallow to keep the dust from filling my mouth. The tunnel accepted me like a slot accepts a coin. On the other side, I straightened. The sound of water did not come this time. The quiet had that weight again. The kind of quiet that suggests the absence of something you only noticed was there after it's missing. I went left, toward the hatch. My feet found the 2 steps as if they'd memorized them. The beam of my flashlight cut a path, and the dust glowed. Ahead, the hatch sat where I'd left it, and the ring handle looked like an eye, and the wood had the chalk smear of a thumb that was either mine or someone else's. I shone my light at the numbers. 17, 23, 19, 9, 4. They sat there obediently, waiting. I lifted the hatch, and the room below looked exactly the same, except for one new thing. The chair was not under the light anymore. It had been dragged toward the wall where the sink was, leaving a fresh scuff that didn't match the old polished one. The new scuff crossed the old like a sentence written over another sentence. The window well threw a thin blade of light over the sink and the initials. LD gleamed like they were wet. They weren't. My heart fumbled. "Lena," I said. "What?" Her voice from the tunnel behind me, closer than I expected. "What is it?" "The chair moved," I said. "You moved it," she said. "I didn't," I said. "Not last time." "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and the certainty was simple. "Do you want to see?" "No," she said. "But yes." She crawled to the edge and peered down. Her breath fogged the beam of her light. She saw the scuff marks the way I saw them, and she made a small sound in the back of her throat that she probably didn't know she'd made. We stood there, 2 people looking at a chair in a small room, and the simple fact of it could be not simple if you let it. I didn't let it. I dropped into the room and put my hand on the chair's back and pushed it back to where it had been under the light. The scrape it made on the floor was ordinary. It also felt like an argument with someone who wasn't there. I looked at the sink again. The initials, the numbers on the hatch, the photo in my pocket, the work order. I was trying to string beads onto a thread that didn't want to be a thread. I took off my glove and touched the initials again with my bare fingertip. The porcelain felt cool and smooth. The marks were rough. Something tugged at my memory, that humming sound my father used to make. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second. When I opened them, I saw the tiny scratches around the letters. Not carved all at once, carved over time, retraced, persistence, habit. Maybe to keep a hand busy while waiting in a room too small. I looked around the room for something we hadn't seen. A hidden box in the cabinet, empty. A note under the chair, nothing. A key taped under the sink, no. A loose tile, a floorboard. It was concrete. It had been poured rough. The walls were painted cinder block. The window was set high and small. The only invitation was the door to the tunnel and the numbers. Numbers resisting meaning are worse than no numbers at all. They make you itch. Find anything? Lena asked from above. Only a feeling, I said, and a lot of nothing. So the usual, she said softly. I almost laughed. Then a sound came that wasn't ours, and I did not laugh. It was small, deliberate, and close. A screw turning in wood, a slot catching, metal in contact with metal in a way meant to be quiet. It came from behind the wall with the sink. The pipes there had cavities, chases that ran between rooms. The sound displaced the air by an inch. You don't believe that you can feel a sound move air in a space that small until you do. I looked up at the hatch and saw only the tunnels dim. Lena, I said. I heard it, she whispered, which told me two things. That she wasn't going to lie to me about it, and that there was no point pretending I hadn't heard it too. Something slid behind the wall, not along the floor this time. Higher, behind the initials. A whisper of weight. Then a pause so long I thought I'd imagined the whole thing. Then the smallest thump. A light one. Like something placed, not dropped. I stepped back from the sink and put my hand on the chair again, this time not to move it, but to put my skin on something solid. The scratch of the initials under my finger felt like flint. We're not alone, I said. No, Lena said. We aren't. We waited. The building waited with us. The water in the pipes did not return. The quiet was an elastic band pulled tight. I had the feeling that if I turned off my light and stood in the dark, my eyes would begin to invent. I didn't test it. The next sound was air being drawn, like someone taking a shallow breath on the other side of a thin barrier. The sink drain made a faint echo, a small hollow cough, as if the pipe itself had a throat. The sound was nothing much, only the kind of thing you wouldn't notice in any other place. Here, it was a decision trying on a face. The numbers on the hatch live in my head still. They were the beginning of the second half of the story, though I didn't know it then. I only knew that my father had been in this building, that he had carved his letters into that porcelain, that the chair had moved when I hadn't moved it, and that air had shifted on the other side of the wall like someone standing there did not want us to hear them. I looked up at the hatch. I looked at Lena's shadow on the tunnel wall. I put my hand flat on the sink and leaned in with my ear close to the cold, painted metal. I thought of his voice, which I had not heard in 20 years. I thought of the way he said my name, like he was about to tell me a trick for getting something stubborn to come loose without breaking it. The metal was cold against my cheek. The room was small. The world felt like it had narrowed to a point just larger than the diameter of the drain. "Hey," I said. My voice was steady. "If you're there." Something on the other side turned in its place, and the drain breathed back. The drain gave a thin breath. I didn't flinch this time. I leaned closer until my forehead almost touched the metal neck. My voice came out low. I said my father's name, not Dad, his whole name. Lawrence. Nothing. Then a soft tap, not counting anything, just the sound of a small thing touching a slightly larger thing. It traveled through the pipe like a note through a cheap radio. "I'm not leaving if I don't understand," I said. "I'm done leaving." Behind me, the chair scraped an inch without me touching it. The sound was quick, like something nerves invent. I turned. The chair was in the same place. The scrape had been real. I felt that in my skin. The room wasn't big enough for tricks. If someone else was here, they were inside the wall. If no one else was here, the building was busy on my behalf. "Talk to me," I said, and I surprised myself by not feeling foolish. Another soft tap from the drain, then the drag sound, then stillness. Lena said my name from the hatch. "That's enough," she said. "Please." 2 minutes, I said. 1, she said, and I heard how tired she was. I set my palm flat on the porcelain. My thumb fell into the groove of the D the way it had before. The groove fit my thumb. That was a small thing, and it felt like more than that. I closed my eyes and counted to 10 by breathing. When I opened them, the dry line that ran across the floor under the light looked like a mark on a ruler. The numbers scratched into the wood above my head looked like they had weight. 17, 23, 19, 9, 4. I said them out loud. I said them like a set of steps on a ladder. 17, I said, and I turned, scanning for something that had 17 of anything. Tiles, cracks, screws. The cabinet had holes where shelves could be reset. I counted the holes down the side. There were 23. That was convenient in the way that makes you distrust convenience. I counted to 17 and pushed the shelf peg in and out like it was a button. Nothing. 23, I said. My voice sounded like a person testing the air for an echo. The sink had 23 ridges under the rim if you counted the tiny ones near the back. I counted anyway. It felt like pretending. 19, I said. There were 19 pitted spots on the concrete within a square foot by my toe if I wanted there to be. You can find 19 of almost anything if you're set on it. 9, I said. 4, I said. It didn't help. I wanted a thing to click into place. Nothing did. It was just a small room under a hatch with stale air and a sink and a chair that moved more than once without a person pushing it. I looked up at the hatch and said, "Okay." I meant it. I was ready to leave and come back with a clearer head. I had the photo. I had the work order. I had the numbers. I had proof enough that my father had lived in this building with his hands and his routine. The rest could be found with patience and a notebook. I reached for the ring handle and then froze because on the underside of the hatch, at the edge where my fingers had been, a small length of twine hung loose from a staple. It was the kind of twine you see on the tags of cheap tools. The end was frayed and dirty. If you pulled it, it would catch on nothing and come away. Or it would do something else. "Hold on," I said. "What?" Lena said. Not a question, a warning. "There's string," I said. "I'm checking it. If you see the hatch move and then not move, pull the string up and get out of the way in case something falls." "That's not a sentence I like," she said, and I could picture the set of her mouth even without seeing it. I took the twine between my fingers and tugged lightly. It moved a fraction and stopped. Something on the other side of the wood resisted. I tugged again, a little harder. The twine slid, and something clicked. Not loud. The wood above me shifted a tiny amount, settling into a new place with a low complaint. A panel the size of a book dropped from a recess in the hatch's frame and swung down on a short hinge. I jerked my head back, and the panel missed my nose by the thickness of a coin. Inside the recess was a shallow cavity. In it lay a folded piece of paper, dark smudges on the fold where a thumb would go, and a brass key on a ring. I let out a sound that wasn't a laugh but borrowed a little from one. I reached up and took the paper first. My hands shook again. I hated how often that was happening, but I let them shake. I unfolded the paper carefully. It was a photocopy of a form, the black on it gray now from time. Across the top, notice of transfer, maintenance personnel. The box for employee had Lawrence Adane typed in. The section for notes had a line added in pen. Reassigned to Annex D. Key 4/9/19/23/17. I looked at the numbers again. The order was reversed from the scratch in the wood. Or not reversed, just different. The slash between them made them read like stations on a subway, or steps. "The numbers are a key code," I said. My voice was too loud in the small space. He wrote them where he couldn't forget them. The paper says Key 4/9/19/23/17. The wood says them the other way. The other way could be the order of turns, Lena said. She had a practical brain, like a safe or a wedge lock. I took the key. It was the old kind, cut in deep fat valleys. It had a number stamped at the head, 17. I turned it in my fingers. My skin made gray on it. I thought of the red boiler sign. I thought of the one locker bank I'd noticed back near the loading bay that I hadn't paid attention to because my eyes had been busy. "I have to see what it opens," I said. "Of course you do," Lena said. "Can you be finished here now?" I slid the paper into my pocket with the photo and the work order. I closed the panel. I wiped the twine dust from my palm onto my pants. I looked around the room one last time. Chair, cabinet, sink with initials, numbers. A place a person could sit and listen to a building breathe and tell himself that the rhythm of the pipes was proof of something he needed to believe. "Okay," I said, and I climbed up, and Lena pulled me through the hatch with more strength than she claimed to have. We moved down the tunnel, past the 2 steps, around the bends, to the hole, back into the boiler room, into the storage room, into hydrotherapy, into the hall. The building felt different. Not in a ghost story way. In a way like you notice when a neighbor has moved away and you don't realize until you pass their door and the TV is not on anymore. Whatever had been moving behind the wall had stopped. The water still hadn't started. The quiet felt less tight. It was a hard thing to trust. Near the loading bay, a row of employee lockers stood tipped against a wall where they had been pulled away from their bolts. The metal was dented, the doors twisted. It looked like scrap. I walked along the row checking the stamped numbers above the vents. 11, 12, 13. I ran my finger over each. The padlocks were gone. On the last upright bank, in the second column, near the top, I saw it. 17. The door had been forced in by someone's knee at some point, bent slightly. No lock. That made sense. No power means no alarm. No alarm means anyone can be brave. You think that's it? Lena asked. It's a start, I said. I pulled the door. It gave after a squeak. Inside, a smell like metal, pencil, and old cloth. The top shelf had a flat tin with a slider lid. The bottom had a rolled-up canvas bag with a strap. On the inside of the door, someone had taped a printed list. Boiler sequence. Winter start. Steps 1 to 12 with boxes to check off with a grease pencil. Many boxes had tallied X's on them. At the bottom, someone had stuck a cartoon cut from a newspaper with a man yelling at a radiator. In the corner of the cartoon, a phone number written in pencil had been erased and written over. Erased again, written again. The last set of numbers wasn't a complete phone number. It trailed off after 3 digits. I opened the tin first. Inside, paper clips, a stub of pencil, 2 Band-Aids still sealed, a bobby pin bent wide, and a coin that wasn't American. It had a hole in the middle. The clean circle there made the dirt around it look darker. I pictured my father turning that coin between fingers while waiting for something to heat or cool. A worry coin looks like that after a few years. I lifted the canvas bag. It had heft. I set it on the floor and unrolled it. Tools nested in loops. Wrench, punch, pliers, small hammer with a chipped head, a set of Allen keys bound with a rubber band, a flashlight that was dead, of course, and had the kind of bulb you can't find in a store anymore, and a ledger book. The ledger gave under my fingers the way swollen paper does. I picked it up. On the first page, in pen, L. Dane. Behind that, dated entries in a handwriting not as neat as the maintenance forms, but careful. The first pages looked like ordinary work notes. Hot water uneven on 3rd floor. Bleeder valve in North Hall sticky again. Order more washers. Then a page where the lines leaned a little like the writer had lost patience with the pen. Sound carried from Ward C through heat pipes. Reports from night staff of voices. Confirmed. Speech-like artifact. Cause. Wind through roof vent. Plus elbows coupling. Mitigate. Pack isolation at joint 19. Corridor D. The numbers were there again. 19. I flipped forward. The entries changed tone around the days with thunderbolt scribbles in the margin. Admin concern about publicity. Do not discuss with press. Staff report feeling watched in boiler when pumps cut at night. Caused by siphon knock. Note. When shut off for 5 per sign, voices stop. Question. Why increase when low occupancy? I put my finger on that line. Why increase when low occupancy? The way it was written said he had said it out loud to no one, and then written it because saying it wasn't enough. Another entry. Annex D temporary holds moved to main for storm prep. Boiler pumps cycling irregular. Found brickwork at breach not per spec. Advised. No action. Key for D-wing service changed. April 9th, 1923, 17. Note for self. I held the ledger closer without meaning to. It was right there. He had written the numbers the way I had found them. Under that, he had added in pencil, fainter. If you're me later, start at 4, then 9, then 19, then 23, then 17. Don't reverse. The latch jams. Don't be smart about it. I was so focused on the words that I didn't notice my jaw had gone tight. I had been about to argue with a note written to himself 20 years ago. I exhaled and my jaw clicked. Lena leaned over my shoulder, mask pushed under her chin, eyes moving fast. "What's he opening?" she asked. "Service line," I said. Behind the boiler wall, the breach. Not to the tunnel we came through, the other one. You're going back down there, she said. Not a question. This time there wasn't a warning in it. More like she was putting facts in a row and pointing. Yes, I said. She pointed to the rest of the ledger. Anything else? There was more. Notes turning from work to something like a diary, but never calling itself that. Short sentences about standing on the roof and trying to see weather before it arrived. A line about the lunch pail dent. Dropped from ladder. Keep as reminder not to step on top rung. A page where the writing had the shaky look of someone writing in a moving vehicle. Called name about transfer out after close. Said to wait for paperwork. Not waiting. A later page where there were only numbers, written large. 1723, 1994. Drawn and filled halfway like practice. At the end, a half page where the ink had bled from water. Only 2 legible lines. If I can't get out, the kid will. And pipes carry more than heat. I closed the book because my hands needed something to do that wasn't holding it. Out, Lena said in a voice I recognized from when we were kids, and she told me to back away from a stray dog. We're going out to the air, and then if you need to come back down, we do it on a clock. We don't go in deeper right after reading that. We eat something and breathe. I nodded even though I wanted to go directly where the numbers pointed. She was right. I didn't want to be the person who ignored the rules I had just made because the rules were inconvenient. We'd go to the courtyard. We'd sit on the low wall around the dead fountain. We'd look at the sky like it could give us advice. We did that. The cold worked into my jacket. My hands got stiff. The town beyond the trees looked like it had stepped back an inch, as if the asylum had pushed against it, and the town had decided to give ground rather than argue. Lena ate a granola bar she had in her pocket, and broke half for me without asking. I chewed and felt like a person who had a mouth again. Tell me the plan, she said. We go to the boiler, I said. We find the other breach. We use the key in that sequence. We don't go far. We see what's there. If it's nothing, we leave. If it's something, we decide. If it's a person, she said, we go. If it's a person, I said, we go. Good, she said, because I don't want to meet any more of this building than is necessary. We stood. We shook heat into our fingers. We went back in. The air took us the way a store takes you when you step through the automatic doors, bland smell and cool, and you know you're somewhere that is designed to hold you. The quiet walked with us. In the boiler room, I studied the patched wall again. The breach we used was small and at knee height. The other looked like a bad repair up at shoulder height, where pipes disappeared through. The mortar line there had a lump that wasn't brick. A plate had been set and mortared over, and the corners showed where the trowel had spread too much. The plate had 5 small round scars like the caps from a punch plug. If you dug them out in the right order and pressed, something would release. That was the kind of thing an old building does to keep people from opening what shouldn't be opened on a whim. I brushed dust with my sleeve. The faint prints of fingers showed on the thin layer. Not ours. Older. Maybe yesterday. Maybe 10 years ago. Dust doesn't keep a calendar. I took the key from my pocket and ran my thumb over the stamped 17 again as if it would warm. 17 last, I said. 4 first, Lena said. Say them out loud while you do it. I pressed at the plug that matched 4 o'clock on a dial. It wobbled a little. I took the key and pushed the flat of it there. The plug slid in a hair. Click. I pressed 9. Click. I pressed 19. Click, and a strong spring pressure under it like a door testing its hinge. I pressed 23 and had to lean my shoulder in, and when it moved, I felt a cold draft on my wrist. I pressed 17 last, and the mortar line around the plate cracked in a neat rectangle, and the plate settled out a 1/4 inch and stopped. Something on the other side released with a sound like an old hinge being allowed to be honest. The seam opened more. A smell came through that was not the building's general smell. It was earth, metal wetness, and something like canned air. Not sweet, not rot, stored. I pried fingers into the seam and pulled. The plate came away and tilted to the floor, heavy enough that when it touched down, the little ring of noise felt like it might go on for a while even though it didn't. Behind the plate, a narrow space, the width of a person's shoulders. Not a tunnel like the other. More like a cupboard someone built into a wall behind pipes, so there would be a place to stand while working. On the back wall hung a jacket, the kind maintenance guys wear if they want to look neat when they go to the front office. Dark blue. A name patch. The patch read, Larry in white thread. I didn't touch it at first. The sleeves hung the way a person's arms do when their hands are in their pockets. The jacket was empty, but the way it hung stole breath. The floor of the cavity had scuff marks from boots. A small stool sat inside. A clipboard leaned against the wall. On the clipboard, a few thin sheets. Top sheet. A note written in my father's hand the way it was when he wanted to be understood. If you found this, you're either me or you've got my habits. I'm using the space to get out of the way and listen. The building talks after midnight. Don't tell them it does. The second sheet was a hand-drawn map. It showed the boiler room, the service tunnel we had used, the hatch, the small room. It showed another line we hadn't seen. It ran past the boiler, behind the wall that bordered hydrotherapy, and then under a section labeled DOBS, below the observation rooms. At the end of the line, a box with X's drawn across it, and the word drop. What's that? Lena asked, peering. A shaft, I said. A laundry drop, or trash. The map says it's sealed. It might not be sealed the way they think. I reached into the cavity and touched the jacket. The fabric had gone limp with age. Dust made a pattern on my fingertips. In the pocket, something hard. I slid my hand in and found a little bag, plastic, folded and taped. In it, a small metal tag like from a key ring. The letters had been stamped into it. DANE. Under that, a series of numbers that weren't a phone or a date. The kind of numbers you get as an employee when the payroll system wants to make you feel like a number with purpose. I put the tag in my pocket with everything else. The weight of all of it together pulled on the seam of my jacket. It felt like carrying a full wallet after you haven't had one for a long time. Useful. Ridiculous. I'm not crawling in there, Lena said softly. You don't have to, I said. This isn't the way. The map shows a line going that way, I pointed. It meant nothing without a compass. In my head, I placed the hydrotherapy room and the small room under the hatch, and the time it takes to move between them. We follow the service line behind hydrotherapy. She rubbed her knuckles. You're sure? I'm only sure I don't want to end this standing here, I said. We closed the plate the best we could and pushed the mortar crumb back into the seam with our fingers. It wouldn't fool anyone who looked, but we were not doing this to keep it from being found. We were doing it to be courteous to a hole. We went out into hydrotherapy and checked the cinder block wall opposite the mural. At floor level, 3 little access covers sat like forgotten watches. When I put my ear to them, the metal was cool and smooth against my skin. Behind them, a hollow space made the right kind of echo. I unscrewed one cover with the broken-handled screwdriver. Inside, darkness, cobwebs like hair, then the glint of a pipe set back further than my arm could reach. I angled the flashlight, but the beam widened too much to make sense of the tight space. We walked the length of the wall and counted steps in a way that felt like kids making a map under a table. 17 steps to the corner. 9 more to the other corner. The numbers came back no matter what you did, like a tune. When we got to the far end near the tile where a mop bucket had rusted a circle into the floor, I noticed a patched square where the cinder block had been cut and replaced. The lines of mortar there were straighter than the others. It looked proud of itself. Here, I said. Lena crouched and ran her finger along the seam. She found a bump and pressed. Something under the patch gave a little and then stuck. Another latch, she said. He liked building latches. I pried at the edge with the screwdriver, and a chunk of mortar fell away. Behind that, a slot. I slid the key in and felt the spring, pressed, and the patch came forward a hair. We both stepped back without talking about it. The patch swung on hidden hinges and opened into the narrow service space between the hydrotherapy wall and the back of the D-wing rooms. A breath of air came out that was warmer than the hall and smelled like cloth left in a sunlit car. Not fresh. Less stale than what we'd been breathing. The space was little more than shoulder width, with pipes low along one side and a shallow trench for cables on the other. The floor was plywood sheets laid over joists and sagging where a boot had softened them over years. It ran straight, then bent. The map in my head matched the way. We squeezed in sideways, our pack straps catching and scraping. We moved like people getting through a crowd without wanting to touch anyone. Say something if you want to stop, I said. I'll say something if I want to run, she said. We passed a spot where light came through a crack and saw an eye-high strip of a room on the other side. Green and white paint, a chair bolted to the floor, a mirrored window. The smell there was different. A little of disinfectant like the small room, and something sour. I kept my eyes straight on the pipe in front of me. I didn't want to look through the crack and see a face because there would be no reason for one to be there. And if there was, it wouldn't be a face I could explain to myself later. And I had to be able to explain this to myself later. At the bend, the space opened a little as if it was taking a breath before going on. There was a gap in the pipes where the line I imagined went down. The floor dropped to a small platform. In front of it, a vertical shaft disappeared into dark. A grate had been set there long ago, then removed, then set back crooked and tied with wire. A stainless steel panel, once shiny, hung on one side with a sticker that had peeled and left the ghost of letters. Linen drop. I shone my light down the shaft. It was a square about 2 feet by 2 feet. The walls were slick in places where cloth had polished them smooth. The bottom was not far, 15 feet maybe. You could climb down with careful feet on the side seams. At the bottom, a square of backflow. Not water, paper. Loose, heavy paper stacked or drifted, soaked and dried and wrinkled, making a bed that looked soft and was not. "Don't," Lena said. "I won't," I said, though I wanted to, because the map showed an X here. "I think it's blocked below," I said. He marked it as a dead end. "What else?" she asked. I looked across the gap. There was a ledge on the other side. The service line continued there. The make-do bridge had once been a board. It was gone now. Only the shadow of where it had been clung to the joists, like the tan line on a wrist after a watch is taken off. Across, a door with a small round hole where a knob had been. The hole looked like a mouth saying, "Oh." "I can jump it," I said, and I hated myself for saying it even before Lena made a sound like a laugh that wasn't one. "No," she said. "You're not doing a jump over a laundry hole in a building that fails at floors." She was right. I stepped back. I re-examined the space like a mechanic checks a car, after realizing the problem is not what he liked it to be. Below the hole, the floor dropped to another ledge. On that lower ledge lay a narrow door panel, fallen. You could drag it up as a bridge with the right tool. We had a screwdriver with a broken handle and a hammer with a chip. We did not have a hook. I lay flat and reached down until my shoulder hit wood. My hand found the panel's edge. It was sticky with old dust and something else that had dried there long ago and never got washed away. I hooked 2 fingers and pulled until my arm shook. The panel lifted an inch and slid back down. I tried again. This time it came a little more, then a little more, and then my wrist slipped and my knuckles scraped the wall. The skin tore where it always does on the ridge. Blood welled up in a neat line, because bodies like neatness while they can afford it. I put my fingers in my mouth without thinking. The taste was old pennies. "Enough," Lena said, catching my shoulder. Her hand was shaking. "Stop. We're not doing this with fingers. We'll go back and find something to pull with. Or we won't go across at all." She was right again. I sat back on my heels and held my hand closed and watched the bloodline go darker and feel less sharp. We backed out of the service line the way you would back out of a promise you made too fast. In hydrotherapy again, the room looked like it hadn't moved in a long time. The mural's lake had no ripple. The straps hung without any idea they were straps. That calmed me in a strange way. We went to the storage room and found lengths of wire on a shelf, the kind you use to tie fence, and a couple of long screws, and an old paint roller frame with the sleeve rotted away but the metal arm still strong. I twisted wire around the roller and made a rough hook cage. It looked like something a person makes for a job that isn't theirs. Back at the shaft, I lay down again and threaded the hook under the door panel, twisted, pulled. It came. 1 inch, 2, 3. My stomach pressed the plywood edge and I pictured the panel slipping, and my hand going with it into the square. I pictured my shoulder wrenching. I pictured my head thumping the side and my teeth hitting wood. None of that happened. The panel rose and I dragged it onto the ledge, and then across the gap until it spanned to the other side. I set it straight, pressed a foot, felt it give a 1/4 inch and then hold. "Don't," Lena said. But her mouth said it in a different way this time. Like part of her knew I was going to ignore her, and she had to say it anyway because that's what people say when they love you and can't stop you. I set one foot on the panel, then the other, and crossed with my back bent like the ceiling was lower than it was. On the other side, I put my palm on the door with the hole and pushed. It swung inward to a space the size of a closet. The back wall had a hatch like the one in the small room, but taller. Numbers had been written there too, faint, rubbed and redrawn. 4/9/19/23/17. Same sequence, I said. I pressed them. The hatch unlatched with less murmur than the wall plate. I opened it. Cold air brushed my face with a smell like soil in a dry cellar. I shone the light and saw stairs. Not many. 7, maybe 8. Narrow. Wood. Some with the edges rounded off by years. I went down one step and the wood complained. I backed up and found a spot where the wood didn't sound as tired on the far left edge. I put my weight there and went down. Lena stayed across the panel, arms pressed to herself, watching my feet like she had promised she would. "Tell me what you see," she said. "Another small room," I said, "like the first, but not the same." My light fell on shelves with nothing on them. A table, another sink, this one with rust at the drain like a tiny rust flower that had bloomed slowly. The initials weren't carved in this one. It had another kind of mark, a straight line scratched inside the basin, like someone had dragged a key there over and over until the line deepened. The sound that line would have made got into my head instantly and wouldn't leave. On the table lay a ledger the size of the other, but wrapped in a plastic bag that had yellowed. I slid it out and opened it. Inside, not my father's handwriting. Another hand, neat like a school teacher working slowly. Observations. Annex D, night. The entries were short, dated, and calm in tone. Too calm sometimes. Patient in 3 repeated numbers after tap through pipe. Still 17-23-19-9-4. Staff instructed to ignore. Maintenance called. No action. Another. Patient in 1 reports hearing the boy in the pipe ask for bread. No bread in unit. Nurse Reed admonished staff not to engage with voices. Another. Overnight. Low water in boiler. Voices increased. Staff said song in air, like radio across street. I turned a page, and my father's name was there. Mr. Dane asked to review pipe chase behind Annex D, provided access, stayed after shift, reports voices are not speech, advises sign, if noises, close for 5. Notes that closing dampers for 5 minutes resolves. Head nurse says this is not practical during day. No change. Below, a line in pencil, tight at the edges. Mr. Dane said if he had a child, he would not bring him here. I set the book down gently. "What else?" Lena asked. "Not much that helps," I said, "but enough to know he tried to fix a thing that wasn't in his job description." "Of course he did," she said. She had known that already. I looked around. The room had another hatch low on the far wall. Smaller. The key fit there too. When I turned it, the hatch fell open to a space like the one I had seen first from the tunnel. Not a room. A crawl only. I didn't go in. I didn't want to crawl anymore. I didn't think crawling would move this forward. I was wrong about that later. But at that moment I wanted angles where a person could stand up straight. I took the ledger and climbed back up. The door panel creaked a little when I crossed back. Each step felt like a choice you can't afford to make again someday. On the hydrotherapy side, I sat and let my hands stop shaking before I passed the ledger to Lena. She flipped pages, face tight. She stopped at the pencil line and read it, and the lines around it twice, then closed the book and held it to her chest and said, without looking at me, "You're not the only one he was talking to." "I know," I said. She handed the ledger back. "We're taking that," she said. "We shouldn't," I said, but I put it with the other things anyway. Leaving it didn't feel right. It felt like letting a person sit alone in a corner of a room for no reason. We backed out of the service line, pulled the patch door, pressed the mortar crumbs in place, and stood up. Standing up felt like being told to breathe after holding your breath under a wave for longer than you meant to. In the hall, we both heard it at the same time. Water moved in a pipe below our feet. The sound grew like someone turning a dial and got steady. It came from the basement. It came from everywhere the pipes went. It wasn't loud. It was the background tone of the place when it had been open. The quiet had ended. I looked at Lena and saw she was going to say we should leave now, not soon, not after one more check, not after anything. Now. She was right. We had gone as far as you should go when the building decides it's going to do what it used to do. We moved. We passed the mural, the straps, the broken thermometers. We entered the hall and took the stairs up to the main level and the corridor to the loading bay. At the elbow of the hall, near the nurse's station, I stopped. Not on purpose. The stop happened to me. The partial handprint in the dust was gone. The dust still held a mark, but it was scuffed across. A line like the edge of a box had been dragged. The line led toward the stair to the basement. "Don't," Lena said, both hands on my arm now. "I'm not," I said, which was a lie. "I'm not," I said again, which was a smaller lie. The elevator doors had new light in the crack between them, a thin slice from somewhere below. Someone had wired something. You could do it with a generator and a line if you knew how and wanted to. The smell of hot dust lifted. My mouth filled with saliva the way it does before you speak to someone in authority. I felt the weight of the ledgers and the photo in my pocket like they were pulling me toward the center of the building. Then a voice came from the stairwell below. Not a ghost voice. A person's voice. Hoarse. Tired. The kind of voice you get from talking into concrete. It said a single word. My name. Not the version most people use. The one he used when he was annoyed with me for leaving a tool in the rain. The way the first syllable tightened and the second fell. Lena's fingers bit through my jacket. "No," she said, very soft. I stood there with my hand on the railing and didn't know if the right thing was to be smart or brave or something else. I felt like a kid on the back stoop in a storm, listening for a car that isn't coming. "Lawrence," I said back. I didn't mean to. It came out like air you've been holding too long. Footsteps below. Not fast. Not careful either. The kind of steps that don't have to be because the person making them has walked those stairs for years. The top of a head appeared, gray hair flattened with dust. Then a face that had the lines of patience drawn over it like wires on a window. A man in a maintenance jacket that fit him. Not because it was the right size, but because he had made his body fit it. He looked at me, and I saw the moment he did the math. Height. Jawline. The way my mouth holds words before I let them go. I saw the math land on him. He said my name again. Not a question. Not a greeting. A correction. like I had been late, and he had been waiting in a place with no clock. I wanted to think before I did anything. I didn't. I stepped down 2 stairs, and then another 2. And then we were face to face the way a person is face to face with a mirror that has aged the same but not in the same house. He smelled like dust and clean metal, like a school closet. He didn't smell like the building as a whole. He smelled like the parts of it that are meant to be looked after. I thought you were, I said, and didn't finish because the way to finish that sentence kept changing. Dead, gone, someone else's. Working, he said, and he almost smiled, but the muscles didn't commit. I am. Lena stood 1 step above me and did not move. Her eyes went narrow in a way that meant don't be dumb. And also I will not leave you even if you are dumb. He looked at her and then at me. You shouldn't be here, he said. It was a sentence you say to your own reflection when your reflection looks like it belongs to a younger person. You left, I said. It came out flat. It was a child's charge spoken with an adult mouth. He nodded once and held the bottom edge of the railing like if he let go the stairs would tilt. I did. Why this place? I said. Why here? He looked past me down the hall like he needed to watch something. Then he looked at me again. Because it's mine, he said simply. Because I know where it creaks and where it holds. Because I tried to make it quiet, and nobody let me. Because when the water came, I knew how to move. Because somebody had to turn it off when they were done making it look shut. He wasn't speaking to make me feel better. He was telling me what had happened to him like he would tell someone why a valve stuck on an old pipe. He wasn't sorry. He didn't look proud either. He looked tired the way metal looks tired when it's bent too many times, and the bend starts to stay. You built secret doors, I said. He shrugged a little, like the word secret was too big for what he had done. There were doors. I made them usable. They wanted things sealed they didn't want to pay to seal right. They sent kids with dried mortar and told them to be fast. I was not fast. I was effective. People heard voices, I said. They still do, he said, tilting his head like he was listening to a faraway radio. You can't change the fact of air moving in a building like this. You can change what the air does when it is told to go through a narrow place. You wrote numbers, I said. I couldn't stop pointing small facts toward him like dogs and seeing which ones he would take in. You scratched your initials in a sink. You left a key. He didn't touch me. He didn't get closer. He was a man who had watched things tumble inside a clear tube for a long time and learned to keep his hands out. He nodded toward the maintenance office door and said, You shouldn't take the ledgers. They'll keep you. It's hard to tell what's yours in a place like this once you carry part of it out. I'm not talking about ghosts, he added, because he knew me even after the time between. I'm talking about how your head will make a job where there isn't one, and then you'll clock in and forget to clock out. I had nothing to say to that. Or I had too much to say and none of it made sense. So I said, Come with us. Lena's breath caught in a way she couldn't help. He looked at the stairs, up toward the door, past my shoulder at her, back at me. He made a small, soft click with his tongue against his teeth the way he did when he was deciding whether to take a socket off a ratchet before putting the ratchet back in the drawer. He shook his head once. I can't, he said. He said it like a fact, not a drama. You won't like the reason. It's not because I like it here. It's because I did a poor job leaving right when I should have, and now there's a door that doesn't open on my side. It's nobody's fault. Don't make it yours. What do you mean a door? I said, my jaw going tight again. Show me. You've seen it, he said. You've been to it. You put your ear to it and asked it to be a person. It did what it could. The small room, I said. The sink. He nodded. That's where I made the mistake of making a habit. Don't make a habit here. He looked down the stairs then, toward the basement, and something moved over his face like weather. The water's back, he said. We should go before it decides it has more ideas. You can't be here, Lena said then, the words coming out like she'd been holding them in a dam that had finally opened. You can't live behind walls. You're a person. You have a son. You have a head that needs a sky. He looked at her with a gratitude that was hard to stand under. I know, he said. But sometimes a person builds their own job and becomes the only one who can be fired from it. It's not smart. It's not brave. It's just what I did. I hated him then and didn't, both at the same time. I hated that he had turned his skill into a prison. I didn't because I recognized it as the kind of thing people like us do when we are good at one thing and the world wants another. The sound under our feet rose a little. A tap line somewhere purged air and made a long, hollow glug. He listened to it the way you listen to a child in the next room, when you don't want to wake them, and also don't want them to stop breathing. He made a face that told me he thought we could make it to the door if we didn't argue. We didn't argue. We moved with him up the last of the stairs and down the hall. At the loading bay he stopped, put his palm flat on the cinder block as if to tell it he'd be back, and then nodded at us to go. He didn't follow. He stayed in the shadow just inside the line where outside begins. Come on, I said, turning, one foot on concrete, one on dirt. I have to check the pump, he said. If it runs with no water, it'll burn. If it burns, a piece of this place will go missing, and the rest will start acting like there's a crack in its tooth. He looked at me, and there was something like apology in it, but not the kind that asks for forgiveness. The kind that says, I won't be the thing you need me to be, but I'll be the thing I know how to be. I'll be on the roof later, he said. If you go there someday, don't sit on the crate. It's rotten. He turned and walked back into the building like he had been born in it, and it had given him a list for the morning. It had the feeling of watching someone go into a field of tall grass, where you know the ground dips. You want to call out where the holes are and you can't, because you don't know where they are anymore. He knew. He always had. Outside, the air hit my face like a reminder. I took a breath that went all the way down and felt like it reached my hands. Lena leaned against the car and closed her eyes and then opened them and said, We're not coming back today. No, I said. And maybe not again at all, she said, testing the shape of the words. Yes, I said. But I knew that was a lie. There are things that want you, and if you carry them away in your pocket, they walk back with you until you bring them home. We drove in silence for a while. Then I said, You believe me? I'm sitting next to you, she said. We saw the same man and he said your name with the same mouth you have. She glanced at me. What I don't believe is that he can stay. He'll stay, I said, until he can't. Buildings do that to people. Jobs do too. At my apartment, I put the ledgers on the table with the first work order, and the photo, and the tag, and the coin with the hole. The table looked like a small museum display someone had put together for a town hall after the newspaper ran a story and asked for memories. I didn't feel like I had a story that made sense. I had objects. I had the sound of water in my head. I had a face I hadn't expected to see ever again. That night, I dreamed I was in the small room with the sink, while someone on the other side of the wall scratched the same line into the basin again and again, and each time the sound deepened a little, until it wasn't a sound anymore, but a mark gravity made on air. I woke up with my jaw tight and my palms sore, and had to sit on the edge of the bed for a while to remember the room I live in is bigger than that room. In the morning, Lena texted, "You alive?" I wrote back, "Yes." Then, "He's there." Then nothing for a while. We fell into the routine of people who are carrying something together and don't want to say its name too often in case saying it gives it more furniture in the house. Days passed. The manager at the shop made a point of giving me all the cars that needed a hand you could trust to feel what's wrong without a machine. I did the work, and it felt both excellent and like biting down on a tin-foil edge. I went home and opened the ledger and read one page each night, like it was a medicine I was supposed to finish, even if I didn't like the taste. The pages were short. The medicine wasn't. On Wednesday, I went to my mother's without saying why, and sat at her table with coffee. I didn't drink while she looked at my face with the same eyes she had when I was 10, and had fallen off my bike in a way you can't blame on the bike or the gravel. She said, "You look like you met a person you used to be." "I might have," I said. "Did you find him?" she asked, and the way she asked told me she had asked herself that question for years, even after she stopped asking it out loud. "Yes," I said. "He's alive." She put her hand to her throat like she was checking her pulse, and then lowered it and set it flat on the table because she's good at not making a scene for her own sake. "And," she said. "He's busy," I said. "He thinks the building will fall apart if he stops doing what he's been doing." "And will it?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "I think it will do what it does whether or not he is there to count for it. But he believes he has to be the one." She closed her eyes and opened them. "He was always like that," she said. "He had a job in his head and the job got bigger than he was." She didn't ask me to bring him. She didn't ask me to try again. She said, "Eat," and put toast and eggs in front of me. Because that's the thing you do when the problems you love aren't problems you can fix with your hands. I planned not to go back. I planned to let the ledgers sit and be like stones on the edge of a pond I didn't have to jump into. That lasted 5 days. Then the numbers wrote themselves across the fog of my bathroom mirror while I shaved. 17, 23, 19, 9, 4. I wrote them with my finger just to get it over with. When the fog dried, the trace stayed a little, like a bruise I had put on the glass. I drove up in the afternoon when the sky was the color of old paper. I went alone because I didn't want to ask Lena to stand inside that wall of air again. I texted her anyway. Going. Not long, she wrote back. "Take a picture of a tree before you go in so you remember a tree exists." I parked in the same spot, walked the same path. The fence was still bent. The broom handle still held its lie. Inside, the smell put its hand on my back in the way a habit does. I went straight to the D-wing stair, and then to the maintenance stairs to the roof because he had said he'd be there later. On the roof, the crate sat near the utility box. It had sunk deeper into the gravel. The pile of cigarette butts had a new scatter to it. I did not sit on the crate. I stood. I looked at the water tower like it might cough up advice. He came up behind me without making the stair talk and said, "You crossed the hole." I turned and he was there, the lines in his face a little deeper, the gray in his hair a little more honest. He wore the jacket with the name patch. It fit him worse in the daylight. He had a lunch pail with the dent. He set it down and the clank made me want to cry for reasons I didn't understand and didn't have time to indulge. "I brought something that belongs to you," I said, and I pulled the tag with his name from my pocket. He didn't take it. He looked at it like you look at a hammer you used to own, that you lost at a job site 10 years ago, and someone hands back to you. And in the time since you lost it, you became a person who uses his hands differently. "You keep it," he said. "You'll remember the weight better than I will." "I remember a lot," I said. "I remember you leaving." "I know," he said. And now he looked sorry, but not in a way that asked for anything. I thought I was putting off leaving for one day, and then the day kept happening, and then I didn't know how to come back with an explanation that wasn't just a list of small things that add up to an insult. "You could come now," I said. "With me. We could take you to a doctor who won't try to fix the pipes in your head. You could sleep somewhere with windows that open the normal way." He squinted at the horizon like he was checking weather. "You need me to be someone I'm not able to be right now," he said. "I need you to be someone who believes I'm not the worst kind of person because of that." "I don't think you're the worst kind of person," I said. "I think you're a person who made a narrow hallway and now refuses to turn around." He half smiled and it landed this time. "That's not a bad line," he said. "I could use that." We stood a while without speaking. The town did little town things down below. The wind ran a hand along the utility box and made a low note that matched the pitch of the water through the pipes below. The threads of sound tied together and then let go. He picked up the lunch pail and opened it. Inside, a thermos without a lid, a folded napkin that had been used as a rag, a little bag of screws. "Do you think you're going to be here in winter?" I asked. "I've been here in winter," he said. "The building is quieter. The air is heavier. You can see your thoughts." "Do you sleep?" I asked. He tilted his hand. "Enough." "Not well. Not in a bed, if that's what you're asking. I don't think I would do that right even if I tried." We talked like that. Plain, almost like two men standing at the open hood of a car diagnosing a sound, until the light changed and the edges of things sharpened and a cold tie pulled across my neck. He asked about my work. I told him. He nodded and said good, in a way that made me want to unspool every detail and show him my hands and the small scars, and ask him if he was proud. I didn't ask. He didn't offer. Some things you don't get to have even when the person who could give them stands within reach. When I left, he didn't come with me. He went down the stairs, and I watched the back of his head, and I thought that if I called out, he would turn. And then what? He would turn and look at me, and I would have to decide whether to forgive him while he was looking, I wasn't ready to do that while he was looking. I went home with the wind in my hair, and the smell of the utility box in my nose, and the sound of moving air in my ears, and the ledgers in my bag and the key in my pocket. I didn't feel lighter. I didn't feel heavier. I felt accurate, and that had to be enough. For a while, that was the shape of things. I went to work. I checked the ledgers at night. I texted Lena dumb jokes about ghost plumbers. I drove up to the asylum once a week and went to the roof with 2 sandwiches. One for me, one for him. Sometimes he came up. Sometimes he didn't. When he didn't, I left the second sandwich on the crate, where the wind could choose which way to push the napkin. Sometimes the napkin was still there the next week. Sometimes it wasn't. I didn't make the difference into a story when I could help it. I told myself mice eat bread too. In late November, when the air cut sharper and the water tower's ladder sang a little when the wind hit it right, the town paper ran a short article. Mercy Hill site to be demolished in spring. A contractor out of a different county had won the bid. The article quoted a councilwoman who said the building had been an eyesore for too long and a safety hazard for longer. The photo was a file photo with the windows already boarded and the angle a reporter stands at when they don't want to get too near. I folded the paper and set it under the ledger like a new layer of dirt on an old grave. I didn't tell him right away. I didn't know how to say it without sounding like I was asking for a scene. When I went up next, I found him on the roof sitting on the crate, even though he'd told me not to. He held himself stiff like the crate might have a splinter in it that wanted to see what his body would do. I handed him a sandwich. He didn't take it. He said, "They're going to knock it down," before I could. "You saw the paper," I said. "I see things," he said, and he tapped the side of his head like I used to when I remembered where I had left a tool. "We can move things," I said. "We can take what matters and leave what doesn't." "Everything matters to someone," he said, known fact, not argument. "Then we choose you," I said, and my throat tightened, and I hated that it did, because tight throats don't help with the parts of arguments that matter. He looked at the view. "I don't know what I am without this job," he said. "You're the person who taught me to change the angle when I'm stuck," I said. "You could try that." He took the sandwich then and held it like he wasn't sure what it did. He didn't open it. He said, "They'll bring pumps and saws and men who move like they've only done this for a year, but their backs already learned last winter's lesson. They won't listen if I tell them where the pipes argue." He stopped and smiled a small, mean smile I recognized as self-defense. "I'll try anyway." "Let me help," I said. "Don't," he said. "You'll make me worse at doing what I think I can do. You make me want to be a person who stands still, and that's not what this place needs from me, if it's going to stop existing with some dignity." I could have told him that buildings don't care about dignity. People do. I could have told him that I was done letting him tell me what my presence did to him. I didn't. I said, "Okay," because sometimes okay is the only tool you can reach without moving your feet in a dangerous way. When December came, snow dusted the roof and melted and froze and made the gravel into hard little stones that rolled under your soul if you weren't careful. I went less. I told myself I had work. I told myself the roads. I told myself the holidays. The truth was I didn't like carrying his choice back down the stairs to my car so often. I felt like a person who visits a friend in a cell and leaves with the shape of the bars printed on his chest. In January, 2 men in dark jackets were at the main door when I arrived. They had clipboards and boots too clean for that building. One had a ring of keys that clinked like they were proud. They asked me what I was doing there without asking it like a question. I said I was looking, which was true, and also didn't answer their need. They said the site was closed pending abatement. I said I understood. They asked if I had been inside. I said not today. They nodded like they had heard that sentence before. I waited until they drove off, and then I walked to the back where the wall had a place a thin person could fit if they wanted trouble. I didn't climb through. I stood there with my face near the crack, and I said his name softly. A long time passed. The air moved in and out of the building like a sleeping animal. I heard nothing else. I left without pictures of trees. The demolition date came in March, and then slid to April because that's what dates do. The day I knew it was happening for real, because you can tell when a thing is happening for real by the sound of decisions being made in rooms you're not in. I drove up before sunrise. The air was tight and old cold. The maples had buds like small fists. I parked and walked fast, and my feet knew where everything was without me looking. At the covered walkway, the banner that said Community Day tore in a gust and flapped hard enough to make the brackets creak. In the boiler room, the patched wall had been broken out by hands that didn't care what the edges looked like. The plate lay on the floor with footprints in the dust across it like a field. The hole was wider. The service tunnel entrance behind hydrotherapy had been busted open too. I felt panic like a small animal in my chest. It ran in circles because it had nowhere to go that would matter. "Hey," I called, and the word came back to me and went past me and made no one appear. I went to the small room with the sink under the hatch and found the chair under the light where I had moved it last. On the sink, the initials were there, but the basin had a crack I didn't remember. It ran away from the drain toward the wall like the building had gritted its teeth. The numbers on the hatch frame had smeared under someone's thumb. In the corner, a new scuff angled in, not like a chair, like a box. I listened hard with my cheek near the sink like before. The drain gave me nothing but air that had touched metal. If there had been a breath once, it belonged to memory now. I heard in a plain way then, not a dramatic way. Just the ache of being a person whose idea of something is farther from the thing itself than it was yesterday. On the roof, the crate had split on one corner and fallen inward. The cigarette butts had blown into the corner against the utility box and collected like dry leaves. The view was the same because the view doesn't know what you did, where you did it. I set my palm on the utility box, and it felt like the back of something alive. I said, "I'm here," and nobody answered, and that was normal. I was still on the roof when the first crew truck pulled up, and the men stepped out and looked up like men look up when they're about to do a job that will be loud. I watched them from the edge where they couldn't see me because the light was wrong. Lena texted, "Are you there?" I wrote back, "Yes." She wrote, "Is he?" I wrote, "I don't know." She wrote, "Come home." I wrote, "Soon." They started with the annex, D-wing first. It made sense. It was the newer build, easier to rip. They did it the way people do it who want to make clean piles. They took glass out. They took doors off. They cut the coats of the building first and laid them aside. They talked in short sentences. One man sang very softly the way you sing when you are counting under your breath. After a while, I realized he was humming to keep the rhythm of prying nails. He had found his job, and the job had found his tune. It was almost kind. I went down into the building one more time while they were moving their trucks around to bring the dumpsters in. I didn't go deep. I went to the nurse's station where the dust had the marks of boxes dragged and the partial hand had been. On the counter lay a badge with a clip. Not his, a nurse's. The name had rubbed off. The clip had the soft yellow of old plastic. I left it there because taking it would be like stealing from a stranger's kitchen drawer. In the hall to the basement, I stopped where he had spoken my name. I put my hand on the railing where his had been, and I felt nothing but cold metal. That's how it should feel. Sometimes you get what you should feel and it's still a problem. I left then because staying would have made me part of the background setting of their day. I didn't want a man in a hard hat to look up at me and file me as guy who stood too long and made me nervous. I walked back to the car, sat, gripped the wheel until the little cuts on my knuckles complained, and drove away very slowly like a person who has to teach his feet to be polite again. They took the building down in sections over 3 weeks. I went up once each week and parked on the road where I could see the edge of the site and not be yelled at. The first week, the roofline lost its right shoulder. The second, the covered walkway became a stack of metal with a banner caught under it like a trapped bird. The third, the main entry came off, and the steps stood a day by themselves like a stage with no play, and then fell in a simple squat. The day after that, the water tower looked closer, as if the view had known what it wanted to show me all along, and had been waiting for the building to stop blocking it. I didn't feel better. One late afternoon toward the end, when the machines had gone quiet, and the site was flat in a way that made your eyes skim like a rock over a lake, I got out and stood a minute in the damp air. A man in a yellow vest picking through scrap near the fence looked up, saw me, and walked over. He had a gray beard cut short and a line of dirt where his goggles had sat. He said, "You the one who keeps coming in the evenings?" I said I might be. He said, "There was a guy like you I saw around, older. He knew where things were. He told me not to cut a pipe because it would bite me. I didn't. He was right. My mouth did something. He noticed and did me the kindness of not naming it. He hasn't come the last few days," the man said. "If he's yours, you might want to check where people go when they stop showing up at a place they shouldn't have been at in the first place." "Where's that?" I asked. He pointed his chin toward the edge of the site where the grass gave up trying to grow. "Somebody put flowers near the tree," he said. "Could be for the building. Could be for something else." I walked there. There were flowers, cheap grocery ones with the sleeves still on. They didn't mean anything to me except that somebody had tried. At the base of the tree, in the dirt where the roots show their backs like old animals, a small ring of bolts had been placed in a circle, heads up. Each had a number etched in it, worn from years of wrench work. On top of one bolt, a key lay flat, old brass, the number stamped in its head, 17. Next to the circle lay a lunch pail with a dent like a thumbprint. The lid was on. I don't know why that undid me the way it did. Maybe because in a life of not closing things, he had closed that. I sat on the root and looked at the key and the bolts and the pail and felt some part of my body try to make a noise my mouth didn't want to make. I didn't make it. I whispered, "Okay," To nobody, because nobody needed more from me than that right then. I didn't ask the yellow vest man any hard questions. He didn't offer any hard answers. If there had been an ambulance, I would have seen it. If there had been a phone call to make, I would have made it. There wasn't. Sometimes the end of a thing happens out of sight, because the thing honors itself enough to choose a corner. He had chosen a corner. He had put his tools in a circle the way we put our hands around our knees when we're tired but not ready to lie down. He had left me a key I already had, which was his way of saying what he always said when he taught me to fix something. You already know how. You just need to try it once with your hands. I took the key and the bolts and the pail, because leaving them there would have been a bigger theft than taking them. I carried them to the car, feeling like I was carrying water in cups I couldn't spill. I went home slow. I put the pail on my table with the ledgers. I put the bolts in a circle again and set the key in the middle. It looked like a dumb ceremony. It also looked correct. For a while after that, I stopped hearing the water in the pipes in my building at night as a voice that wanted me to decode it. It went back to being what it was. That was a gift. I took it. I slept. Spring came. The site where the asylum had been was scraped flat, and then not flat again with piles of dirt that looked like blankets thrown in a hurry. Someone put a sign up with a rendering of a building with clean lines and too much glass. The artist who drew it had never stood in that wind. The sign promised a community center and small businesses and a walking path. The letters looked like they thought they could keep people's backs from hurting if they made the font round enough. Maybe they could. I won't say it won't be good. Maybe it will. A thing that ends doesn't have to be the kind of ending that ruins the next thing. It can be an ending that lets something else get a chance to matter to someone. Lena and I walked the path when they finished it, and the maples had leaves again. The path traced the old courtyard in a way that only people who knew it would recognize. We sat on a bench and ate a sandwich and didn't talk about the parts that would have made our throats tight. A kid on a scooter went past and tried a trick and failed and laughed and tried again and got it and yelled in the plain voice kids have when they surprise themselves. I go up to the water tower sometimes and stand on the hill and look at the way the new building stares at its own reflection in its windows. I stand where the crate used to be. You can't stand on a roof that isn't there. You can stand where the air used to be the kind of air you learn to recognize by taste. I touch the bolts in my pocket out of habit. I keep one key on my ring now, the one stamped 17. It opens nothing. It is not for opening. It is for remembering that there are doors that go both ways, and doors that go one way, and doors that are only doors because a person treats them like that. When my heat kicks on at night, and the pipes give a small click, I think of him at the sink, with his thumb in the groove of the D, and the way his jaw worked when he chose not to apologize for who he was. Sometimes I answer out loud to no one. I hear it, and then I let the sound be just the sound. That's not nothing. That's the job now. I still have the ledgers. They're in a box on a high shelf, not because I'm hiding them, but because I don't want to trip on them going to the kitchen in the dark. Once a year, on the day the first crew truck pulled up, I take them down and read one entry. Not to keep a vigil. To remember the plainness in his handwriting when he wrote something like, "Bleeder valve sticky again." You can love a person without loving the place they chose. You can keep a key that no longer opens anything and still feel like you're holding up your end of a small bargain. Lena took the photo and had it framed cheap at the shop that frames kids' art and high school diplomas. The framing made the off-kilter crop look deliberate, like he meant to take a picture of sky and the top of his own head and a corner of his sad eye. She keeps it on a shelf by her door under a plant that cannot decide if it wants to live or die. It gets enough light. It has water. Sometimes that isn't what decides. If there's a moral to any of this, I don't know it. I know there was a building. I know it had rooms where people sat alone. I know the pipes carried more than heat. I know a man worked there and then lived there and then stayed there too long because he was good at making broken things a little quieter. And the world does not make it easy to stop doing the one thing you're good at when everything else is loud. I know he said my name. I know I said his. I know I keep a key I don't need in my pocket, and sometimes reach for it when a sound in a car stumps me, and the angle I've been trying isn't the one that will give. When I do that, I can hear him, not because his voice is in the pipe, because it's in my head like anything you learn with your hands. I change the angle. The stuck thing loosens. It's a small victory. It counts. It gets me through the day. That's not a ghost. That's a habit that finally turned into a door that opens the right way.